The sound came first, not his voice, but the sharp crack of a manila folder hitting the mahogany conference table. The slap echoed through the sealed room, making the crystal water glasses vibrate against their coasters. Above us, the recessed lighting hummed with a persistent electrical buzz that reminded me of mosquitoes trapped behind glass. Then Cameron Lawson spoke, his tone rehearsed to the point of sounding robotic, each syllable carefully measured like he'd been coached by a media consultant the night before. Effective immediately, Rowan Pierce, you are terminated from your role as Chief Innovation Officer. The air left the room. Nobody moved. I heard the scratch of a pen freezing mid-stroke, the rustle of fabric as executives shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Eyes darted sideways, careful not to meet mine. Nobody wanted to be remembered as the person who showed sympathy. I looked directly at Cameron. He sat at the head of the table in a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it looked painted on. His silver tie caught the light at odd angles. He held himself with the posture of a man who'd just won something valuable, though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. I'd seen countless executives in my career, but none had ever walked into a boardroom radiating such obvious insecurity masked as confidence. My pulse hammered in my ears. Fragments of memory collided. 9 years of late nights, weekends sacrificed, holidays spent alone in the lab while my friends posted pictures of family gatherings. I'd missed my sister's wedding rehearsal because of a product launch. Eaten more vending machine dinners than I could count. Watched the sunrise through office windows so many times I'd lost track. All of it condensed into one clinical sentence. A surgical cut. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my laptop shut or storm out with tears in my eyes. The dramatic exit he probably expected, maybe even hoped for so he could feel justified. Instead, I gathered the papers in front of me, aligned them into a neat stack. I stood slowly, straightening my spine until I felt every vertebra click into place. Then I spoke, my voice level and clear as if commenting on the weather. Thank you. 2 words. So, I watched eyebrows lift around the table. Chairs creaked as people leaned back, visibly confused. One board member frowned like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. Cameron's expression remained fixed in its mask of authority, but I caught the flicker, a momentary tightening around his eyes, the slightest shift in his posture. My gratitude unsettled him more than any outburst could have. What none of them knew was that I'd been preparing for exactly this moment for 3 years. Not because I'm psychic, but because I'd learned to read the patterns. The subtle shifts in budget meetings. The way certain people stopped including me in email chains. The reorganization announcements that always seemed to carve away at my authority. I turned and walked toward the glass doors. The corridor stretched ahead, polished floors reflecting the overhead lights in long white streaks. My heels clicked a steady rhythm. Behind me, the boardroom door sealed shut with a pneumatic hiss. I felt no weight of defeat. Instead, something close to liberation spread through my chest, as if shackles I'd worn so long I'd stopped noticing them had finally fallen away. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. I remembered that night 3 years ago when the CFO announced we were slashing R&D funding by 60%. Everyone assumed the Velocity Protocol project would die. I'd stayed in the lab until dawn, rewriting the architecture from scratch, and quietly filed the patents under a shell entity I'd formed 6 months earlier. Back then, nobody paid attention to the fine print. They were too busy panicking about layoffs to read what they were signing. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. I stepped inside and the doors slid closed, cutting off the view of the floor where I'd spent nearly a decade building something extraordinary. The elevator descended. I counted the floors by feel, the slight G-force shift, the subtle hum of the cables. When the doors opened on the ground floor, Seattle's afternoon chaos greeted me. Car horns blared. A bus hissed to a stop at the corner. The smell of fresh rain mixed with exhaust and coffee from the cafe next door. The world kept turning, completely indifferent to the fact that a chief innovation officer had just been erased from a company org chart. I stepped out onto the sidewalk and inhaled deeply, tasting the wet air. Cameron Lawson believed he'd eliminated a problem, cleared a path for his own vision, removed an obstacle that challenged him too often in meetings. In reality, he'd just activated a countdown timer on a bomb he didn't know existed. I smiled to myself, not for him, not for the board, but because I knew something they didn't. Sometimes thank you isn't acceptance. It's a declaration of war. As I walked away from that building, rain beginning to speckle my shoulders, I thought about you, whoever's listening to this right now. Are you on your commute? Sitting in your living room? Taking a break at work? Leave a comment. Tell me where you are. Because if any part of this story sounds familiar, you're going to want to hear what happens next. The door to my Capitol Hill apartment closed behind me with a hollow thud. I stood in the darkness for a moment, listening to my heartbeat gradually slow from its frantic pace. Outside, Seattle's typical evening sounds filtered through the walls. The rumble of buses climbing the hill, music thumping from a bar down the block, someone's laughter echoing off brick buildings. Inside my apartment, silence pressed down like a weight. I flipped the light switch. The space looked more like a research lab than a home. My dining table had disappeared under stacks of documents, patent applications and technical specifications. Coffee mugs formed a small skyline along the edge. My laptop sat open, the screen dark but still warm. I sank into the wooden chair, suddenly exhausted. My phone immediately began buzzing. A cascade of notifications that made the screen glow in rapid pulses. Messages from my old team poured in. Elliot, Rowan, did they really just, are we supposed to keep working? Zara, legal just sent out a memo. All projects frozen pending review. Cole, always blunt. Well, that's how loyalty gets repaid around here. I read each message, feeling my chest constrict. These were the best engineers I'd ever worked with. Now they were soldiers abandoned mid-battle, confused and angry, watching the ground fall away beneath them. I wanted to reply, to tell them everything would be okay, but my fingers hovered over the keyboard and fell still. What could I say? I had no comforting lies to offer. I stood and crossed to the bookshelf where I kept a few framed photographs. My sister Rachel smiling at her wedding, the one where I'd missed the rehearsal dinner. A picture of the team in the lab at 2 a.m, all of us exhausted but grinning, holding slices of cold pizza like trophies. I touched Rachel's photo gently. The question rose unbidden, had 9 years been worth it? My phone rang. Not a text this time, an actual call. I checked the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Sweetheart, I just saw the news online. Are you all right? Her voice carried that particular tremor of a parent trying to stay calm while panicking internally. I'm fine, Mom. Really? The words came out hollow even to my own ears. Honey, sometimes walking away is the biggest win. I just don't want to see you destroy yourself over people who don't value you. I closed my eyes, swallowing against the tightness in my throat. Part of me wanted to believe her, to set down this burden and let it go. But then Cameron's face flashed in my memory. The way he'd looked at me like I was a line item to be deleted from a spreadsheet. After we hung up, I set the phone aside and pulled a cardboard box from under the table. It was heavy, stuffed with files and contracts from 3 years ago. I spread them across the table, scanning page after page. My heart rate picked up as I searched. Then I found it. The paragraph I'd hidden in plain sight among thousands of words of legal language. In the event of project termination or removal of direct project oversight, all intellectual property rights, patents, and operational control automatically transfer to the principal architect as designated in Addendum C. My hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, from vindication. I laughed, quiet and disbelieving. It was the first genuine laugh I'd managed all day. Cameron thought he'd buried me, erased my name, cleared me from his path. Instead, he just pulled the pin on the grenade I'd planted in that contract 3 years ago. Outside my window, Seattle glowed against the dark sky. The city didn't care about a fired executive. The world kept spinning. But in this small apartment, I knew something the rest of them didn't. Another game was about to begin. And this time I held every card that mattered. The next morning, I woke without an alarm for the first time in years. No 5:30 a.m. gym session. No 7 a.m. stand-up meeting. No cascade of Slack notifications demanding my immediate attention. Just silence and gray Seattle morning light filtering through my blinds. I made coffee and turned on the television more out of habit than interest. Cameron Lawson's face filled the screen immediately. He sat in a television studio, positioned in front of a backdrop featuring Core Innovations logo. His navy suit looked freshly pressed, his hair styled with precision. The lighting made him look younger than he was. His voice carried that practiced smoothness of someone who'd been media trained within an inch of authenticity. Core Innovations is entering a transformative phase. We're moving beyond dependence on individual contributors toward a sustainable, scalable, truly agile organization. This is about optimization, about efficiency, about building something that outlasts any single person. I nearly choked on my coffee. He was rattling off corporate buzzwords like he'd swallowed a business school textbook. To someone who'd never built actual technology, it might have sounded impressive. To me, it sounded like a toddler explaining quantum physics. The camera cut to the board members. Older men in expensive suits nodding thoughtfully, as if Cameron had just revealed the secrets of the universe. One actually had his eyes closed like he was listening to classical music. On Twitter, analysts were already clipping the interview, adding hashtags like #CoreTransformation and #NewEraInnovation. I sat back, cradling my mug, smiling slightly. No anger rose in me. Just a calm, almost detached amusement. Every promise he made was built on quicksand. The first wave would wash it all away. My phone buzzed. A message from Cole. Cole watched him talk for 6 minutes. Counted 9 empty buzzwords. New record. I snorted and typed back, careful. String together a few more and HR might promote you to VP of Strategic Synergy. Cole, face with tears of joy. Despite everything, that exchange reminded me I wasn't alone. The people who actually understood the work could see through Cameron's performance. That afternoon, an email arrived that I'd been expecting. Subject: Legal Review of Intellectual Property Assets. From Core Legal Department. The tone was unmistakably threatening, wrapped in professional language. Core Innovations reserves the right to conduct a comprehensive audit of all patents and intellectual property developed during your tenure. We expect your full cooperation in this matter. The implication was crystal clear. They wanted to strip away everything I'd created and claim it as purely company property. I wasn't surprised. Cameron wasn't patient enough to rely on public relations alone. He'd play the legal intimidation card eventually. I'd been counting on it. I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out the yellowed stack of contracts. Originals, signed, notarized, legally bulletproof. Clause 7.3.2. Clear as daylight. They could threaten all they wanted. The law sat firmly on my side. That evening, I walked down Pike Street as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Core's new billboard dominated the intersection, a massive display featuring Cameron's face and the slogan, "Innovation Without Limits." I stopped and looked up at it, laughing out loud. A couple walking past glanced at me like I might be unstable. "Innovation without limits," I muttered. "You're about to learn what limits really feel like." Back home, I turned on the TV again. Cameron had appeared on another program, some tech podcast recorded in front of a live audience. The host leaned forward, expression serious. "There's been significant turnover in senior leadership recently. Do you worry this might slow Core's momentum?" Cameron didn't miss a beat. He sat up straighter, smile confident. "On the contrary. We've removed inefficiencies so the organization can move faster. This was a strategic optimization. Sometimes you have to clear out legacy systems to make room for the future." My jaw clenched. Legacy systems. He was talking about me like I was outdated software ready for deletion. But that outdated software held the only key to the system he needed. I leaned back in my chair, forcing myself to relax. No point in getting angry now. His circus would collapse soon enough. And when it did, the person he'd discarded as obsolete would be the only one who could have prevented it. I poured myself a glass of wine and looked out at Seattle's nighttime skyline. The city sparkled, indifferent and beautiful. Cameron's performance was almost over. He just didn't know it yet. 11 days after my termination at 9 in the morning, Seattle woke to unusually clear skies. Sunlight glinted off glass towers downtown, casting geometric shadows across the streets. I sat in my apartment, laptop open, Slack still logged into Core's company channels. Nobody had bothered to remove my access yet. Probably an oversight in the chaos, or maybe they didn't think I mattered anymore. On my television, a live feed showed Core's main auditorium. The camera panned across rows of investors in tailored suits, notebooks balanced on their laps, expressions carefully neutral. Cameron strode onto the stage like he owned the world. His gray suit fit perfectly, his red pocket square coordinated precisely with his tie. He raised both hands in a gesture of welcome, signaling for the background music to fade. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed through the sound system. Today Core Innovations will demonstrate the future of distributed computing. The Velocity Protocol isn't just a platform, it's a revolution. We're about to change this entire industry. Polite applause rippled through the audience. Scattered, uncertain. He turned toward the massive screen behind him, gesturing grandly for the technical team to begin. I sipped my coffee slowly, smiling because I knew exactly what was coming next. You might wonder, didn't they test this demo? Of course they did. They'd run through it multiple times in their development environment. In staging, everything worked flawlessly. Because I'd left them a temporary authorization key. Just enough to build their sandbox, run their rehearsals, create the illusion of control. But this wasn't a rehearsal. This was production. This was live in front of real investors with real money. And only the master authentication key could unlock the actual system. Cameron didn't have it. I did. The dashboard loaded. Code began scrolling across the screen. Then abruptly everything froze. A single line of text appeared, stark white against black. Authorization expired. System access denied. Clinical. Final. Unmistakable. The auditorium went silent. At first they thought it was a minor glitch. Cameron forced a laugh, trying to maintain composure. Just a small technical hiccup. We'll have this resolved in 2 minutes. 2 minutes passed. The error message didn't budge. 5 minutes. Whispers started spreading through the audience like ripples in water. 10 minutes. Investors began shaking their heads, exchanging glances. One snapped his portfolio shut with an audible crack. Another stood and walked out, phone already pressed to her ear. My Slack channels exploded with messages. Elliot, wait. It worked perfectly in staging yesterday. What changed? Zara. The staging key isn't the production key. That's what changed. Cole, translation, we're completely screwed. I laughed, not cruelly but with genuine relief. Finally, my preparation was speaking for itself. On stage, Cameron bent down, hissing something at the engineers huddled near the control booth. Even from the camera angle, I could see sweat beginning to shine on his forehead. His smile stayed frozen in place, but it had transformed into something desperate. Everything is under control, he repeated, voice wavering slightly. Just a few more moments. But those moments stretched on. 15 minutes. 20. The room's mood shifted from patience to annoyance to outright hostility. Investors who'd been sitting politely now leaned forward. Arms crossed, faces tight with irritation. Then the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. Ellen, the chief operating officer known for her composure, rose to her feet. She held her tablet high, her voice cutting through the manufactured optimism like a scalpel. Wait, are we saying we've actually lost operational control of our own platform? The question detonated like a bomb. The auditorium erupted, investors shouting questions, demanding answers, voices overlapping into chaos. Cameron's face went pale. His mouth opened and closed. Of course not. We have redundancy protocols. Backup systems. Everything is. But his voice cracked on the last word, snapping like a worn guitar string. Nobody believed him anymore. In my apartment, I sat perfectly still, watching it all unfold. My Slack notifications kept pinging. Zara, this isn't a bug. The system is locked. Elliot, and I think we all know who has the only key. Zara, locked. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, feeling something like justice finally arriving after a long delay. Cameron thought he'd erased me, struck my name from the company directory, removed my badge access, deleted me from the organizational chart. Instead, he'd activated the failsafe I'd embedded in that contract 3 years ago. The one nobody had bothered to read carefully because they were too busy surviving budget cuts. The demo collapsed in spectacular failure. News outlets reported it clinically. Core Innovations experiences system failure during investor demonstration. They called it a system failure. But it wasn't. It was the contract executing exactly as written. It was the rule I'd planted, patiently waiting for someone to violate it. Midday sun streamed through my window, illuminating the scattered documents across my table. I closed my laptop and leaned back, stretching. It felt like watching a chess game where I'd moved my piece 3 years ago, and it was only now reaching the perfect square. I whispered to myself, too quiet for anyone else to hear, "Game on, Cameron." That night my apartment stayed lit past midnight. Documents covered every surface. Contracts, emails, patent filings, legal opinions. I sat surrounded by paper, red pen in hand, circling clauses and making notes in the margins. I'd read these terms so many times I could recite them from memory. Still, I kept reading, needing to confirm that what I knew was real. That I genuinely held the power. The weight in my chest hadn't lifted. Even with the law on my side, I felt the complexity of what was happening. Core had been my professional home for 9 years. Watching it collapse felt surreal, like witnessing a building you helped construct catch fire. Worse, the engineers I cared about were trapped inside, confused and scared. Around midnight, I stood and walked to the small shelf near my window where I kept a few photographs. The frames had gathered dust. I wiped one clean. My sister Rachel at her wedding, smiling in her white dress. The wedding where I'd missed the rehearsal because of a product deadline. I could almost hear her voice in my head. Rowan, you can't fix everything. Sometimes you have to let things fall apart. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to convince myself that walking away was the right choice. But then Cameron's face would flash in my memory. The way he'd called me an inefficiency to be removed. As if I were nothing more than a corrupted file to be deleted. I couldn't let that stand. Not for revenge, but because I refused to let him humiliate everything I'd sacrificed to build. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Elliot. Elliot, they want us to rebuild the entire system in 5 days. Completely impossible. Zara, Nathan is supposedly leading the effort. But I don't think he understands the core architecture. Nathan. The name hit me like cold water. He'd been my deputy, the person I'd trusted most. We'd spent countless nights debugging code together, sharing takeout at 3 a.m., laughing about bugs that took hours to find. I'd believed he would protect what we built if anything happened to me. Now he was standing with Cameron. Before I could process that fully, a direct message appeared from Nathan himself. Nathan, Rowan. We both know you control the access. But Core can't just stop operating because of a contract technicality. You don't really want to destroy everything we built together, do you? I stared at the message, throat tight. Part of me wanted to believe he was being forced into this. That he had no choice. But his words were clear. He'd chosen a side. And it wasn't mine. I typed carefully. Nathan, that clause isn't a technicality. It's the only protection I built for us. For the work. His response came fast. Protection? Or a way to hold everyone hostage? I watched you annotate every contract, Rowan. Now I wonder if you were always planning for this so you could be the only one with power when things fell apart. I let the phone fall onto the table, feeling like I'd been punched. He wasn't entirely wrong. I had prepared for this scenario. But not to seize power. To ensure that if everything collapsed, at least one person would understand how to save it. I'd chosen to be that person. And now I was being painted as a villain for it. In the silence of my apartment, I logged into the system's administrative backend. The one only I could access. A stream of access attempts scrolled past, all from Core's internal servers. Nathan. He was trying to bypass the security. I watched him work, recognizing his patterns. He tried rewriting authentication modules, spinning up clone servers, even attempting to spoof the master key. Every attempt failed. I'd layered in protections at every possible entry point. On his 10th try, the system automatically locked him out entirely. Unauthorized access attempt detected. User privileges suspended. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. Hurt that the person I'd trusted most had betrayed me. Relieved that the system remained secure. Outside, Seattle's night glittered with 1,000 lights. Inside my chest, everything felt darker. I poured another glass of wine and stared at the blank screen. I thought about my mother's words, about the engineers suffering because of this battle, about whether I was becoming the kind of person I'd always despised, someone who hoarded power and justified it as protection. Another message appeared. This time from Cole. Cole, still on your side. 2 words. But somehow they were enough. I smiled, not broadly, just the faint curve of my lips. Whatever happened next, someone understood. Someone believed in what I'd done. And that reminder kept me from giving up. I closed the files and looked at my reflection in the darkened window. Not the Rowan who'd been fired. Not the woman weakened by betrayal. I saw someone different now. Someone who realized this wasn't just about contracts or companies. It was about dignity. About truth. About refusing to let arrogance win. And the fight was only beginning. The morning after the system crashed, the news had already saturated every tech platform. Headlines screamed from my laptop screen as I drank coffee at my kitchen table. Bloomberg: Core Innovations faces system outage during critical demo. TechCrunch: Investors flee after Core loses control of flagship platform. The Verge: Cameron Lawson's first major crisis. Complete system failure. Twitter had exploded overnight. The hashtag Core Meltdown trended in the top 5 nationally. Analysts who'd praised Cameron weeks earlier now posted commentary dripping with schadenfreude. One tweet particularly stood out. A CEO who loses his core IP will be taught in business schools as a cautionary tale for decades. I sat back, coffee cup warming my hands, and smiled grimly. Not because I enjoyed watching Core burn, but because reality was finally catching up to Cameron's arrogance. 3 days later, the second collapse hit. Core announced internally that they'd fully restored system functionality. I watched from my apartment as the Slack channels filled with cautious optimism. Elliot: Looks like we're back online. Running tests now. Zara: Production environment is responding. Maybe we actually fixed it. Less than an hour after that message, everything crashed again. Elliot: Wait. Everything just went dark. Zara: Not just the demo environment. Customer accounts. Partner sandboxes. Everything shows authorization expired. This time it wasn't backstage. This was a full public failure, bleeding out to customers, partners, vendors, and investors in real time. The second outage hit publicly. Core's platform went dark for customers, partners, and investors alike. News exploded. Core meltdown trended nationwide, their stock plummeting 34% in hours. As expected, Cameron fought back by pointing the finger. At a press conference, he declared it wasn't a system failure. It was sabotage. He named me live on TV. My phone lit up. My mother called, shaken. They're saying you destroyed the company. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said. But inside, fury burned. Cameron had framed me. And in doing so, he pushed Nathan, the one person still loyal to Core, to break. That night, Nathan leaked everything. Emails, logs, proof that Cameron fabricated evidence. The truth flooded the company. The board panicked. Accusations flew. By morning, the headline read, Cameron Lawson resigns as CEO. I sat in a quiet cafe reading the paper. Cameron's photo showed him broken, tie loose, eyes hollow, clutching a cardboard box like a ghost of the man who once fired me. Then came a call from Core's legal counsel. The board wants to meet. Today if possible. I smiled into my coffee. The executioners now needed saving. When I walked back into the boardroom, silence fell. Directors stared, desperate. Cameron stood against the wall, powerless. They offered me everything: seal-level authority, triple my salary, equity, veto power. A full surrender. Cameron snapped. She held us hostage. You're rewarding her. I didn't flinch. I built this system. I protected it because I knew someone like him would ruin it. And you let him. I closed the folder. You can't buy integrity. You lost that the moment you let him fire me. Peter, the board chair, pleaded, name your price. I paused at the door. You can't afford what I want. Because what I want, respect, trust, dignity, you destroyed when you threw me out. I walked out. Behind me, chaos erupted. I didn't look back. My footsteps echoed down the hall, steady, certain. The game was over. I'd already won. I stepped out of Core's lobby, the weight of their desperation behind me. They'd lost me for good, and in doing so handed me the ultimate proof. I was never the problem. I was the foundation. 2 days later, an unexpected email arrived. Subject: Confidential discussion, strategic partnership opportunity from Christopher Wells, Vanguard Technologies. My pulse jumped. Vanguard, Core's long-dismissed rival. And Christopher Wells? A fellow engineer who'd walked away years ago, refusing to watch innovation die for profit. His message was direct: just coffee. Between people who actually understand the technology. I went. We met in a quiet cafe near Pike Place. No pretense, no spin. I left because they stopped valuing builders, he said. Now they're collapsing. But your work, the Velocity Protocol, is too important to vanish. He slid a tablet across the table. The first line stopped my breath. Acquisition offer. $1.6 billion. It's not just about buying IP, he said. It's about preserving its purpose. You'd have full authority. Ethical safeguards. Real power. I read the clause he mentioned, page 17 ironclad. A kill switch. For me. One condition. My team comes with me. Elliot Zara Cole. Done, he said without hesitation. 2 days later I signed the deal. Blue ink on white paper. $1.6 billion. Not revenge, vindication. As I walked out of Vanguard that evening, the sky burned orange over Puget Sound. I smiled not for the money, not for triumph, but because what I built would finally become what it was meant to be. The next morning the world knew. Headlines exploded. Vanguard acquires Velocity Protocol in landmark $1.6 billion deal. Core plummets as former executive sells patent to rival. My sister called stunned. You just sold something for over $1 billion. I can't even comprehend that number. Rachel called breathless. Rowan. You just sold something for over $1 billion. I'm better than okay, I said. You're proud of me? That means everything. I looked out over Seattle. My city, my story, rise, fall, and now resurrection. My laptop lit up. Elliot Zara Cole. Offers accepted. See you Monday, I typed. Core held a press conference. Peter, broken and defeated. The loss of the Velocity Protocol is a major setback. Ms. Pierce acted within her legal rights. The responsibility rests with leadership. Core was finished. A cautionary tale of arrogance and incompetence. Mom called. You did it, Rowan. I'm so proud. Thanks, Mom. Tears stung my eyes. His chapter was over. Mine was just beginning. At Vanguard's town hall, Christopher introduced me. With Rowan leading our vision, we'll build something extraordinary. I stepped to the mic. I'm not here for buzzwords. The Velocity Protocol isn't just code. It's years of sacrifice and a brilliant team who refuse to quit. We'll push boundaries, fail, succeed, and do it all with integrity. Applause thundered. Elliot Zara Cole grinned in the front row. Later, a journalist asked, genius or revenge plot? I protected my work. Core made their choice. I made mine. If you could speak to Cameron? Thank you. Thank you for underestimating me. For thinking a title mattered more than competence. In trying to erase me, you proved real value can't be deleted from an org chart. The headline read, Rowan Pierce, the architect who rewrote the rules. One tweet said it best, she didn't destroy Core. Core destroyed itself. She refused to go down with the ship. Months later, in my new office overlooking Elliott Bay, Core filed for restructuring. Cameron vanished, still blaming everyone but himself. My team thrived. The protocol evolved into something greater. People ask if I planned it all. No. I simply prepared. I saw how companies discard builders for suits. So I safeguarded my work. Cameron's arrogance triggered my defense. His downfall was his own doing. I earned every dollar. Not for greed, but for the years, the sacrifices, the vision. And because without me, that technology would have been corrupted or abandoned. I feel proud. Not arrogant. Proud. To anyone feeling undervalued, overlooked, exhausted, your worth isn't defined by someone else's blindness. Protect your work. Document it. Read the contracts. Build real alliances. And if they try to erase you, make sure you're woven into the foundation so deeply, removing you brings the whole thing down. Core lost $1.6 billion in the time it took Cameron to fire me. He lost everything in 11 days. Me. I smiled, said thank you, and rewrote my story on my terms. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be erased.